hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is Listening Beyond the Soundbites. We have two guests this evening with an interesting subject, the Pledge of Allegiance. My first guest is Ted Tedesco, who is a resident of Woodbury. Ted, welcome.
Hello, Pat.
And a longtime friend, I might add.
Yes, indeed.
Yes. And his daughter, Jennifer.
Hi, thank you
Hi.
for having me.
You're welcome. I'm glad you both are here. Jennifer was very involved in this issue at Hardwick Union about the pledge, and so we wanted to invite them on the show. We'll save the good news for last.
Thank you, Pat.
Yeah. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I have been a resident of Vermont since 1999, which was the year I retired from the Marine Corps after a lengthy career. And I live in Woodbury in a wooded setting. I like very much. It's rural,
Right.
5 miles down dirt. I like that very
Nice.
much. You bet it's
Keep
nice.
washing your car. I live on a dirt road.
I never bother to wash
Yeah,
it. That's,
well, that's
why,
probably what we
why
should
bother?
do.
And I'm here with my daughter and my wife, and living in my dog Semper.
Oh, Semper Fi.
Semper
I like
Fidelis,
it.
that's correct.
Yeah.
And living a dream life, as far as I'm concerned.
Nice.
Right here in the middle of Vermont.
Do you remember when we met?
I do,
I do. Oh.
of course. Well, I think the first time I came across you was in your capacity as the Secretary of the Agency of Transportation,
Right.
and always had a joyous time sitting with you at lunch. And you were such a hoot to sit with, because you'd join us, a party of about 8 to 10 employees at the table, and we'd be telling jokes. And of everyone in the cafeteria, you had the most gregarious laugh
Right.
that drew attention.
That's true.
And
I'm
we
famous
enjoyed
for
it.
that at the State House as well. But thank you. Jennifer, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I'm Jennifer. I'm a Hazen Union High School senior right now. I'm very actively involved with my community, American Legion Auxiliary junior member.
Nice.
Many sports activities, a lot of band, a lot of pep band, a lot of different instruments.
Good for you. Excellent.
thank you.
Keep you out of trouble, right?
We try.
We try, right. So we read in the papers that the school's principal decided that for some reason the pledge was not going to be said over the loudspeaker every morning. And you let them know your displeasure. And just what happened?
Well, I have to give credit to my daughter in this regard. The current principal is new to the job. He assumed his duties sometime just prior to the start of the 2018 September opening.
Oh, right.
And he inherited a situation where the Pledge of Allegiance was regularly said over the public address system in the mornings as part of the morning announcements.
Right.
And the students would participate. But upon his assumption of the role of principal, that fall of 18, he decided that he would not continue with that tradition. Now, my daughter noticed it right off, and she approached him and told him very politely, but also firmly, that she would like to see the pledge returned to the school. And he put her off, saying that there'd be some type of decision made in approximately 2 weeks. Now, keep in mind, this was at the start of the
Right, school year.
school year, and here we are today in February with what appears to be a resolution several months past the 2 weeks that was promised. So my daughter would continue to approach the principal through the school year and also keep her dad informed as to what was happening. And I knew this would come to a head. And a couple of weeks ago, the principal announced that there would be a community-wide meeting at 6 p.m. This was January 31st, a
Right.
Thursday. And we had a good attendance. We had several dozen people who showed up. And I would say about, of the, let's say, 40 people there, I would say we had about 38 or 37 or 38 people in favor of continuation of the pledge.
Good for them.
And 2 or 3 perhaps who were not.
Right.
It was very heartening to see this. And the meeting progressed very civilly. At the start of the meeting, with the support of the local VFW post right here in Montpelier, VFW Post 792, we passed out small American flags
Oh,
to
cool.
all the attendees,
Right.
which was well received. The meeting progressed. We watched a videotape. We discussed. But the meeting finished without it being indicated to us there was any decision.
So do you know where the board is on this? Your board, did they weigh in on this, or are they okay with all of this?
I know nothing about any school board involvement. That's not to say they're not involved or
Yeah.
aware. I just
Be
do
interesting
not
to
know.
see their minutes, whether they, because they would have had to have written that down,
Indeed.
where they
Indeed.
are on
Yeah.
this. So this has been going on since September. How come, what prompted the press to finally pick it up? Did some folks call the press by any chance?
Well,
or-
this is, that would not be beyond me, but I did not do that.
Okay,
Uh,
just thinking.
What actually happened, I was at a local business establishment last week, perhaps it was Tuesday or so, and I happened to be talking to the owner about the situation at Hazen Union High School in Hardwick, and his employee overhearing this said, "I'm going to call the press on this," and he did.
Wow.
And without any
Because they
cajoling
kept
by
it
me.
quiet for quite a while.
It was kept very quiet. I think the principal was surprised to see WCAX appear and also to see the significant town turnout that occurred.
Well, I have to tell you, if I had known about it earlier, I would have been there. And to my surprise, my husband said, "I'll go with you."
Oh, great.
I would have gone with you because we just had, I forget what we did, but something
Great.
to do with the notice was a little too short. But I
Yeah.
bet you had some folks from out of town that.
We had folks that were slightly beyond the boundary.
right.
You know,
So they heard
no one
about it.
from California that I know of.
Well, you would have had somebody from Berlin. So
Right,
before we get into more, because there's
Sure.
a lot more to tell of this
Yes,
story.
indeed. Yeah.
I know from your postings that you know about the pledge, the origin and its meaning and stuff, and I'd just like you to talk about what you know about our pledge and why it should be so important to us.
Well, the history of the pledge begins about 1892 when a fellow by the name of Bellamy, who actually was a pastor in the Baptist faith, and he also happened to be a socialist. Well, he was a writer for a particular magazine, and they approached him asking for him to create something to help in the commemoration of the 400th anniversary of Columbus landing, 1892.
Right?
And he did. He created the Pledge of Allegiance. Now, the original creation was slightly different than what we recite today.
Right.
There have been a couple of changes to it since 1892.
Right.
And but it caught on very quickly across the nation. School kids began saying the pledge in their classrooms, and it continued as such up to even today.
That's great. I think the biggest change was, which people talk about, is the "under God"
Correct.
phrase,
Right.
which I personally love, and actually say it louder than the rest of the pledge because I get so mad that people are arguing about it.
Right. That expression "under God" was added in 1954 under the Eisenhower administration. At the time, there was little notice to it being added.
Right.
I suppose it was a different country back then.
Well, I read it was during the McCarthy era where, the whole, I'm sure everybody knows about the McCarthy era and
Right.
communism, and so they put it
Right.
under God just to be sure they knew who we were.
That's correct. We were not a godless communist
That's right.
state.
That's right.
correct. Yeah.
Cool. So I just wanted to ask both of you, actually, what does the pledge mean to you, and why are you we were in this fight so much?
Well, the pledge, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. So you're pledging allegiance not to a individual person, but you're pledging allegiance to the flag. So that begs the question, what does the flag stand for? And I like to think of the flag as being the embodiment of all the people, that we're one American family. We have many differences, many different viewpoints, many different shapes and sizes of people.
Many different stripes.
That's right, many different stripes. But nonetheless, part of the American family and the American experience.
Right. And
And so I'm pledging allegiance to the flag and by extension and association to them. It is something I feel very strongly about. I did 23 odd years in the Marine
Right,
Corps,
right.
so I understand oaths and pledging to things. And I find a comfort in pledging allegiance on those occasions when it's expected of me to the flag of the United States of America. It's a pledging my fealty, my loyalty to the people of this country.
Right.
And I find nothing extraordinary about that whatsoever. I also find it incredibly affirming, and I'll talk about this later if you'd like, that the recitation of the pledge is a completely voluntary act.
Right, that's right.
And it has been since, I believe, 1943, when the Supreme Court ruled that the government could not compel anyone to recite a pledge to anything.
Right.
And think how incredibly affirming that was of freedom and liberty.
That's right.
That during the height of World War II, we're fighting for our national survival against the fascists, Germans and Italians and Japanese. That here comes the Supreme Court that says, you know something? We are a big enough and strong enough country that we can say to you, you're not required to pledge allegiance to it.
Right.
And frankly, I endorse that. I always defend and will speak in support of anyone who declines to recite the pledge or who declines to stand. It doesn't cause me any ill will towards that person.
Right.
It's their right. It's their constitutional right. And I defend the Constitution.
In high school, which is a few years ago for me, we had several people, kids that just stood at attention and did not say the pledge. And I don't think, for them it was back then it was more religious reasons. And we were all fine with it. They respected us by standing and paying attention to what we were doing. And I think when we go up to Canada, I do the same to them. I stand when they're singing their national song, and I wish I could sing the words, but I can never get it right. But I would stand out of respect for them.
In those circumstances, when someone does decline to stand or to recite the pledge or to recite certain parts of it, for instance, the under God part, that's completely within his constitutional rights. And I also think it's an excellent teaching moment. If that teacher was to say at the conclusion of the recitation, okay, class, now I noted that some did not stand. I want to point out to everyone that's here that that is his constitutional right.
Oh.
And that is part and parcel of what makes this republic so grand.
Right.
So do not be critical of that person for exercising their rights, because you also are exercising your rights through the recitation of it.
That's right. Jennifer, I don't want to, it's a hard act to follow.
I know.
You can just say ditto what Dad said. But maybe you could talk a little bit about what the pledge means to you and why it upset you that they stopped saying the pledge.
Yeah, so my dad covered it really well. The biggest reason why I asked the question was in the 2018 year, I was elected by the American Legion Auxiliary Juniors as their national vice president
Oh, wow.
for our Eastern Division. And that title is really important to me because when we say the Pledge of Allegiance, which is what we teach our junior auxiliary, you're saying a pledge to a flag which represents unity between people. We all come from different backgrounds. We all face our own struggles. We all have different households and different schools, but when we stand together to say the pledge and we see stars and stripes, we know that together we are one in America. And to me, that's just really important.
She beat you, Dad.
That's
Good
no
shot.
problem. She did well in fewer words, too.
But yes, you did. That was great. I think you told me Hardwick is not alone in this. I think there are around this state and probably the nation, I'm sad to say, it's something that's happening.
Yes, it is. It does happen every so often. I see something in the press, and it's disappointing. I think that the people generally want to be left alone with their beliefs, be it in support of something like the pledge. And then occasionally it occurs that someone or some group comes along who wants to push the envelope a little bit, and it's an unsettling experience for many people, and something that they're not used to, having to stand up
Right.
and be counted. And there's a certain factor of inhibition that people experience. They just wish that we could go on as we have been. I mean, after all, the pledge has been in its entirety, to include under God, has been determined by the Supreme Court to be completely constitutional
Right.
to say at any venue,
Right.
okay, at any time. So if it's not being said, it's because someone in a position of authority
Chose
is,
not to.
that's right, has selected
interesting.
not to say it. But, you know, most people are conflict adverse. And so when these issues come up, I feel that oftentimes the person who is pushing for the reconsideration of the pledge does tend to occupy the platform or the microphone, so to speak, and there's not enough of a response to it. And people have their lives. People are not generally political activists. You know, they want to take care of their children, go to their jobs, and I'm retired. So that's why I'm able to dedicate several dozen hours every week to this.
Wow. How much of this, to bring in a few other things that are happening around, because you mentioned the flag,
Right.
how much of this is the feeling that's going about when they take a knee? You know, and all the other, I mean, the disrespect for the country, the military, the police. How much of this is all sort of intertwined and part of what's going on now? People are so angry.
Well, I agree with that statement, but I don't think there's a nexus between the
Oh.
Pledge of Allegiance and
Good.
kneeling.
I'm
and
glad to
taking
hear
a
that,
knee.
actually.
Well, you know, issues involving the pledge and opposition to the pledge date back decades. You know, and the kneeling at the national
That's-
anthem,
It's a new
what
thing
is that,
here,
a couple
right.
of 3 years
Yeah, right,
tops?
right.
Okay, so it's just a new manifestation of questioning the status quo, maybe questioning the government.
Yeah.
Myself, I wouldn't think it's the appropriate way to do it, but some do.
Yep.
And it certainly is because of the way the children, the young people are instructed. I mean, keep in mind that a lot of teachers 10 years previous were 15 years old themselves.
Right.
And they were instructed. And then, you know, you can carry this back several generations, perhaps to the 60s, where there was a more questioning and rebellious attitude towards tradition and the status quo. And you understand why you find yourself today with many people in the teaching profession being proponents of this type of
Right,
questioning
right.
of the tradition of the pledge or the
Sure.
kneeling.
Get into a discussion of freedom of speech and people
That's right.
showing up at college campuses trying to speak about conservative values.
It's very
it's
interesting.
everywhere. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
So what do your classmates think, Jennifer, do they join you? You said a lot of them want the pledge back, or?
Yeah, so several of my classmates were almost too scared to ask our administration.
Right.
I've never really been fearful of administration.
Can't imagine where you got that from. But.
I don't know. But there's a want for the pledge in our schools, and it's overrun enormously by those in positions of power.
Great.
A lot of our students want it to come back. A lot of our students would campaign for it to
love
come
that.
back if they were given the platform and
Right.
they were told that they could say the pledge, because some of our classrooms don't even have an American flag, and that's devastating. And so they see their teachers not wanting them to even try to participate. The teachers are taking it away from the students before they even have the opportunity to ask for it.
Pat, we're not going to drop a name here. We're not going to do that. But there is one teacher who has actually said there will not be an American flag in my classroom, and there will not be a recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance in my classroom.
Oh, be still
And-
my heart.
Yes, indeed. I mean, and this is a teacher, a full-time teacher at Hazen Union High School who has expressed this. And this will be a topic that I'll be discussing with
I
the
would
principal.
hope so. I would hope so. I might join you. That's really disturbing. Yeah, now
It
you've got
is.
now you've got me off track, because that's just unacceptable. What are they teaching? I think this whole thing. Maybe Jennifer, I'm sure Dad would tell about. But what happened after the pledge stopped and two of your students, they were on the PA system and one chose to say the pledge.
Yes.
And kudos to him or her. But why don't you tell us what happened afterwards?
Yeah, definitely. So I am a teacher's assistant in the middle school band. So I got all my kids ready for band, and we hear the morning announcements, and we hear the pledge come on after the morning announcements, and my kids are looking at me like,
That's,
well,
whoa.
do we stand? Like, we didn't know this was coming back. We only heard the last couple lines, so obviously we didn't have time. And a few classes later, the intercom came on again, and we hear the same voice of the student that said the pledge that morning with an apology. And I was wondering, how did that happen?
Right.
So after that class, I went to talk to the student, and I asked them what happened.
Right.
And they said that the principal asked them to apologize over the intercom for saying the pledge.
That's a very difficult situation to put that young person in, because I thought from the post I read that there were two kids involved, and one refused an apology and the other one gave it. And I said, kudos to the one who didn't, but support for the kid who did, because the principal put him in a very difficult situation.
Yes.
Yeah, we understand he was in the office for approximately an hour.
Yes.
Oh, really?
The students
So,
I was talking to afterwards said that they had to meet with the principal for an extended period of time, and then had follow-up meetings the next week with their parents and the principal.
Now, the principal denies that he coerced or compelled the student to apologize, but I would say spending an hour in the principal's office,
Sorry.
on the face of it, is evidence that's exactly
Nor
what
do I
happened.
think of any child would raise their hand and say, "Oh, let me apologize."
apologize.
I love to apologize.
That's right.
So, what lesson do you think that the principal? I mean, what is the purpose here? Do you know, Jennifer?
I don't
I
know.
don't know.
I
We'll
wish
switch-
I knew.
Yeah, switch it to Dad. What's he thinking?
He's not disclosed to me, and I've had several at-length discussions with him
Yep.
on this issue just in the past several days. He's not disclosed to me what his motives are. We had a tradition at that high school, a high school which, by the way, gave one of its sons to the War on Terror. And so there is a great patriotic feeling in the town about that and towards the family. And the principal wanted to revisit what, in my opinion, did not need to be revisited or did not need to be looked at.
Right.
He created a tumultuous experience for the community. It was distracting for the students.
Right.
The pledge is legal, it's traditional, and it's convenient when
Right.
you say it over the PA system.
Right.
And he has literally spent, if you account for all the students
Right.
in the school and all the time that has been invested in this topic, he has spent hundreds, if not thousands of hours of student time,
Right.
because there were student discussions on the topic prior to this past week. There were periods of classroom.
He's got other things to think about, like maybe teaching the kids. I don't know.
Maybe.
It's a concept. Wow. Well, there's so much going on. I don't think it was quite like that when we were in school, and me, but way before you. It was pretty simple back then.
Yes, it was.
Got on the bus, went to class, went home, and there's a lot of stuff that the kids have to deal with now. I give your daughter a lot of credit. And as long as we're talking about your daughter, why don't you share with everybody what your daughter's been up to lately and the award that she received, which is amazing, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Well, of recent, my daughter has won an essay contest. It began at VFW Post 792 here in Montpelier, and she was selected as the post winner,
Right?
her essay submission, and then it went up to the region. She was selected as the regional winner, and then the 3 regions went to the state for consideration, and she was selected as the state essay winner.
Nice.
So now she is, in the next several days, inbound to Washington, D.C. for an all expenses paid trip. Her and 52 other,
Wow, from all the other states? What an
and
experience.
Puerto Rico
Puerto Rico and Europe all have
Guantanamo
someone
Bay.
coming.
Oh, nice.
as a post. And so they'll be competing for about $150,000 worth of scholarship money.
Wow, Jennifer.
Yeah, I'm very excited.
I bet. Now, did I read that you can't share the text of the essay?
Yes, ma'am.
Otherwise, you'd have to kill us, right? With the cone of silence. But only the people who have been reviewing the essays. And then in Washington, I'm assuming they would read your essay. And
Only if I win.
well, we're assuming you are, Jennifer. Let's go. What would you do with that money? Where would you go?
So it's a college-specific scholarship. So I would have put towards my education, but I believe that's probably the best place to put that money.
Yeah.
Top prize being $30,000 would really help me
Nice.
pay for college.
Have you made plans where you think you might want to go?
I don't know yet.
Yeah, it's
I'm
too
waiting
early.
on a lot of decisions to come back.
She's got
Imagine-
applications out to many schools.
Does she? Oh,
She's had some acceptances. She's had interviews with some very
Great.
nice schools.
oh, great.
And but she has not finalized her
It's a
decision.
big decision to make it. What are you? How old are you? 17?
17.
Yeah. I'm still making decisions and not doing well at that either.
I hope she
So-
goes to a college close to home.
We'll try. I'll do my best.
You told me that this was not the first time that you were perhaps vocal about the pledge, and even wound up on some TV channels we would know. Could you
Yes.
talk about?
Well, it's almost deja vu. In 2008, the principal ended the school year without saying the pledge at the final assembly, and I let it go.
Where? What school was
This
this?
was Woodbury Elementary
Oh,
School.
elementary. Oh my gosh.
And but the following fall, I attended the first day of classes and the first day assembly, and again the pledge was not recited. So I know the principal, and so I approached her and I asked her what were her intentions with regards to the pledge.
Right.
And she said, "Oh, it was just an oversight."
Huh.
And I said, "Well, great then. If it's just an oversight, I'll expect to see it at the next assembly in a few days." And she said, "Oh no, we have to have a staff meeting and a discussion to determine, whether or not and when we're going to bring." I said, "Wait. You just said it was an administrative oversight. That
Right.
means you forgot to say it." And she walked away. Well, I created a petition. There are 600 voters in my town.
Right.
Of the 600, I approached 330 of
Wow.
them.
Should have run for office, Ted.
And I got, out of those 330 that I approached, 300 signed in the affirmation. They wanted the pledge returned.
Wow.
And only 10% or 30 declined to sign.
Right.
So that's a pretty good.
That's great. That's a great
That's
return.
pretty good. So we presented it to the school board. School board didn't want to do it. Presented it to the principal. Principal didn't want to do it.
Didn't want to do.
Return the
What?
pledge.
Whoa.
Did not want to comply with the will of the townspeople.
Wow.
Can you imagine that? So, in this instance, I did contact the media, and before I knew it, I was on Fox and Friends in the morning being interviewed by Steve Ducey.
Great.
I had the AP interviewing me. I had the Boston Globe in my
Wow.
residence out in Woodbury interviewing
Right.
me. I was on radio stations across the country by phone.
Great.
WCAX had me on air several times. Mark Johnson had me on his WDEV
right,
show.
Right.
It was supposed to have been for 30 minutes, but he said to me, he says, "Ted, this is going so great. Can you stay for an hour?" And I said, "Sure." And we did. And we took calls.
Right.
And I think what was interesting about the Mark Johnson show, people who were calling in were expecting like me to be angry.
Right.
And I wasn't. I was simply saying it's constitutional, it's legal, it's traditional, and it's convenient if you say it as part of the morning routine at Woodbury Elementary. If you don't have to say it, I support you in that regard, and you may have your beliefs. I'm not after those. I'm simply trying to say that there's a lot to be learned. There's an instructional or a teaching moment here
Right.
that
for
can
the
be
kids.
applied to all these children,
Right.
and it needs to be brought back to the school. Well, my understanding is that based upon the phone calls that Woodbury Elementary received, they essentially had no phone service for about 3 weeks,
Excellent.
and they couldn't get an outside line. And about 3 to 4 weeks later, they relented and brought the
Said
pledge
uncle,
back.
uncle, right?
They did,
There
yeah,
you go.
yeah.
Well, I was for the show. I was looking up on the internet, and there have been so many cases about the pledge in Washington. I mean, it's 1957, 1960. It goes on and on, complaining of, about the under God, about whether people have to recite it, and this thing has been through the legal system, upside, downside, and
That's correct.
two ways to Sunday, whatever.
Yeah.
And then you said that the district said that you don't have to be compelled, but it's been through the ringer.
It has.
And it's here to stay.
It is. And I mean, the Supreme Court, there have been federal district courts, there have been Supreme Court opinions, there have been even state opinions. Even in Massachusetts, the state Supreme Court upheld the Pledge of Allegiance. So I'm not saying that the objections to the pledge are going to end,
Right.
but they seem at this point in time to be rather fruitless.
Yeah. Well, because I think
It's
people.
a voluntary thing.
Right. It takes, 2 minutes? And I've always wondered.
Try 15
well,
seconds. Yeah.
how many people really listen to the words? And you talked about them before. But at the end, it's under God with liberty and justice for all. I mean, this is not a bad thing. This is a good thing. And you're saying it's affirming how you believe and how we all believe.
Yeah, I should think that we'd all want to work towards that.
Right.
I'm not compelling you to say those words. I'm not compelling you to work towards those goals. But I think those people who recite the pledge, I have an expectation that they should be working towards liberty and justice for all.
Right.
I mean, that seems like the American thing to do.
Right.
And if you want to do it without reciting the pledge, that's fine also.
Right.
You may opt out, as the expression is.
Yep.
But if there is no legal basis whatsoever for it not to be recited, to include with the inclusion of under God. So the pledge, as you pointed out, Pat, it's here to stay. It's
Right.
only up to the authority, the power, be it the committee
That's
chairman.
interesting. I didn't know. I wasn't thinking about that, and I'm going to pay attention
Yeah.
from now on to see why the pledge isn't said in certain venues.
The legislature says it on every Tuesday morning,
Yep.
both the House and the Senate
Right.
here in Vermont.
I never miss those mornings. They always have the best speakers from different religions, which is great, and just different people talking about issues that are more of a personal nature. It's pretty good. And then we say the pledge, and kids come and sing our state song, and
Sure,
it's great. You
Sure.
feel like I'm here to do work, and
that's right.
it just sparks you up, gets
You're
you
here.
going.
You're here to do the nation's work.
Right? It's cool.
You know, you're contributing. You're part of it.
Yeah. So now, who's going to tell everybody the really good news?
Well, the really good news is that as of this morning, there was an assembly, and the principal announced that he had relented. He had changed his mind. The pledge is being returned
Good.
to Hazen Union High School in
Great.
Hardwick, Vermont, beginning Monday at 7:50 a.m. It'll be
Great.
recited over the PA system
Good job.
for all to hear.
Good job. I hope everybody
you.
clapped and expressed their appreciation for his changing his mind or something.
Well, our principal, after he gave the announcement, he asked how many of our students are ready to move forward together.
Oh.
Every single hand in our gym went up.
Excellent.
People are excited that the pledge is back.
I think that's an amazing story, because I don't know how the kids. We were brought up a little bit in a different environment because I went to Catholic school, so that's another whole story about the nuns. But because you said the preds whether you wanted to or not. But how have you? I'm probably from your dad. Learned to be, I think, patriotic and love this country and understand the symbol of the flag. It just isn't taught anymore. I mean, we won't get into the stomping on the flag and burning it because I know it's people's rights to do that, but it drives me crazy. But how have you learned that over the years? It's been through your family, probably.
Yeah, it's definitely been more through my family than the educational system.
Right.
My Nana, obviously coming from England and having to fight to be here, and my dad being a Marine and fighting for her right to be here. I care because they put this platform out
Right.
for me to live a life that's so free and
Right.
I can pretty much do whatever. And I think it's really admirable that there are people who are willing to risk everything so we can just continue our regular day. I haven't taken a history class that's taught me anything about the flag or the pledge in probably 6 years since I left the Catholic school in Barrie.
Yeah.
so there's a really big root issue in our public schools that Americanism isn't being taught.
Right.
And that's one of the things that I'm trying to sort of bring back a little bit, because I think it's really important that our students are taught these things and are taught why we say the pledge, and not just, well, we'll take it away if we don't understand it.
I don't understand what the alternative is. I mean, if we don't have the flag, if we don't have patriotism, what are we left with? I mean,
Pat, we probably hear this expression, American exceptionalism. We probably hear that quite a bit. I've heard it more in the last year
Right.
than I have in the several years
Right.
before. But no one seems to really know what American exceptionalism is. And so I'm going to throw something out at you that on July 4th, 1776, with the Declaration of Independence, we established a new order, a new relationship between the citizens and their government. Now, up until that time, every place in the world, every continent, every country, there was a royal family, a monarchy, kings, queens, dukes, duchesses, lords,
right,
who could take from the common man at their whim their land, their farm animals, their money. July 4, 1776, that all changed, and it changed here in this country. Now we were guaranteed a right to due process. The Constitution coming in 1787, we were guaranteed a right to due process, and that no one could simply take from us. No royal family, no government could simply say, we want that from you, without there being a due process applied. Now, regrettably, today, I think that government has become the royal family,
right.
has become the monarchy. And we have to fight against that. But that's what makes America exceptional, is that we were the first in the world to say the people have the rights and the government is not in control.
Right.
There's no monarch.
Well, I think people always misunderstand the difference between democracy and a republic.
That's correct, they
And
do.
maybe you could fill in the blanks on that, if you can, because I think they're always saying, well, this is a democracy. No.
No,
No,
a
it's
republic depends upon laws. And so the fact that a majority, let's say, there's 100 people voting and 51 people want what you have,
Right,
they can't take it
Right.
in a republic because there are laws that protect you.
that's right.
But in a pure democracy, they can.
Yeah, the
Oh, wait a
majority
minute.
wins,
Yeah, the
right?
majority, it's called the
Too bad,
tyranny.
right.
The tyranny of the majority.
Right,
And you always want to guard against that. So when people say, well, we live in a democracy, I hope not.
no, right. I think they're going towards that, though. I think you're right.
We need to have
Yeah.
laws that protect the most innocent and the most defenseless of us
Right.
against the overbearing majority.
Right, and they don't teach this in school, do
No.
they? No.
No,
No.
I think
No.
maybe half my AP government class still thinks we live in a democracy.
Great. I taught at the Graniteville Christian Academy for a year. Don't ask me how this got started, but for a year I taught them about civics. And we went to the State House. We actually had a bill that we were following through the process that we asked one of the legislators to draft for us. And I taught, and this was all new to them, and they loved it, and especially when they went to the State House. But they don't teach anything anymore. It's just gone.
Yeah.
And of course, you get the stuff on the college campuses. If you come with a different idea, you're booed off the campus.
Yeah, what's curious about that with regards, let's say, to Berkeley, is that the free speech movement of the 1960s
started-
began at Berkeley.
Right, exactly.
It began at Berkeley.
Right?
And today, it's just the opposite.
Yeah, it's changed.
Free speech is being shut down at Berkeley
Yeah.
because somebody has determined that somebody's viewpoint constitutes hate speech. And by the way, there is no such thing as hate speech.
No, I haven't read saying it anywhere.
There's
is
not,
it? Right?
no, the Supreme Court has never found that there's any such thing as hate speech.
Right.
You can't say something to incite someone like, I want you to go burn down that building.
Right.
That would be criminal
Right.
and could be prohibited. But to simply say, to express an opinion about what you feel,
Right.
there's no such thing as hate
Right.
speech. And it's very difficult for kids today to think that they should be able to shut down the expression of ideas.
Right.
Remember, someone once said that the best cure for hate speech is more speech of the opposite type.
I was back and forth with somebody on Facebook, and they said, well, what's wrong with stopping? I said, when you're doing the freedom of speech, you're not supposed to interfere with anybody, not stop the traffic on the road,
That's right.
not stop the speaker from showing up at the
right.
podium. Because I know what it was. They wanted to know whether people who stood up in the balcony of the State House and interfered with the due process, whether there's some kind of criminal or legal action that could be taken, and if they're stopping the proceedings,
That's right.
maybe so,
That's right.
because it's the other people's rights to continue on with what they want to do, and go scream outside or something.
It is a concern that
Yeah.
young people they've misinterpreted or they misunderstand what freedom of speech actually means. It's all well and good to have freedom of speech, so as long as you're speaking about something that they agree with.
Well, that's
You
the
know,
truth, isn't
and-
it?
yeah.
That's really true.
Yeah.
Because I know in college, that's the original intent of college, different ideas, and you're an intelligent young woman, and it's your
Yes.
choice to decide, well, I like this better than that, but if you don't know, you can't decide.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, so what sort of college? I haven't asked her now with all this. You've become somewhat of an activist there, young lady. So are you going to continue
so.
in the political vein, you think, or?
Yeah, so I would like to go to college for a double major of secondary education and history,
Whoa,
which ties in a little bit.
that's great.
I've had some really great history teachers and some not so great history teachers, and I want to be able to provide some sort of knowledge and
Good.
guidance for the next generation of
Great.
learners, because I've seen the way that education is run right now, and it's a little concerning. And
To say the least.
yeah, I find that my change is in a classroom, and I look forward to providing
That's
that.
great. A teacher can have the most unbelievable impact on a child if if they're good and they really get the child's attention. I mean, you can change your life around.
Mm-hmm.
It's really amazing what happens today in schools. Good for you.
Thank you.
Because history, because Bruce and I are like fanatics about Gettysburg,
I know.
and there's a thing there where they talk about one of the wars at the museum. I leave there every time. I've seen it 20 times minimum. I cry. I get so I don't know, into the whole thing. I just ride around Gettysburg and I feel very patriotic, and to see any of these statues come down, it's history. It's how we learn, and that's how we should look to the future to learn what happened before us and make it better. So anyway, so what's her now? Are you going to go on Monday? And
Yes, it's my intention to be in the lobby of the school
good.
so that I can hear and ensure that the principal has followed through.
Good.
And then we'll move to the next issue, which is the flags, the presence of flags in classrooms.
Yes. Now you said is it the VFW? I just wanted to get that. Which military group here
The
that brought the
VFW
VFW?
donated small flags
Right.
on the night of the meeting,
Yeah.
which was January 31st. They were small handheld flags.
Yeah.
And we'll see if any of these fraternal organizations
Will help you
will
for
help
sure.
again. Perhaps
Interested
help
to
the
see about
school.
the teacher who refuses to have a flag in
Amazing.
class. Just-
Amazing.
That's one for the books,
And
Yeah.
this has been going on for quite a while.
right? And she still teaches here. That's interesting.
yeah.
I'm sure she's allowed to do that, but just thinking that you don't want the flag in your classroom.
Well, she does allow some flags in her classroom, but not the American flag.
I don't even want to know what other flags are in there. Am I going to get mad now?
There
Just
is-
different flags.
There's one teacher who we went to find flags because our school held a mock election this past year, and I asked for her flag. We were borrowing everybody's
Right.
flag, make it as patriotic as possible. She goes, I don't have one in my classroom, separate from the one that we previously talked about. That's not possible. Everyone has a flag. She goes, "It's in the closet over there." I pull out the flag, and it's covered in paint,
Oh, wow.
and the staff is broken, and it's starting to tear. And I go, "Can I replace this for you?" She says, "I don't want it back." And I say, "Okay, then I'm gonna take it." And she says, "Good, I don't want it."
Hmm.
I'm like, "I found this in your paint closet.
Right.
That's concerning."
Yeah, exactly.
It was so disheartening. I was upset. I was trying to do this fun thing with my government class to
Right.
put together a mock election, and I'm staring at Stars and Stripes covered in paint
Right.
and completely like disheartened that one of my teachers would do this.
Wow.
3
Things have
years.
changed a little.
If they have, 3 years ago, I approached the school as a member of my American Legion post.
Right.
And with their approval, I offered my services to launder and repair, to launder the flags and to repair the staffs that the flags were on. And one of the flags, I think it had never been cleaned since the day the school opened. What, was it in the early 70s?
I don't
Yeah,
remember.
there's a plaque, I think it's the early 70s. It was so dusty, it was greasy to the
Wow.
touch.
Right.
And when you touch the flag, a plume of dust would emanate from it.
Jeez.
And then another flag in the auditorium had Coca-Cola stains all over it.
Excellent.
And the third flag hanging in the gym was torn. So we corrected those deficiencies, we laundered the flags, replaced a flag, and repaired the staffs that the
Right.
flag
Good
stood
for
on. And so Hazen High School has got my attention when it comes to
Good
flags.
for you. Good for you. I'm sorry, I'm shaking my head. So that's going to be the next project. And I know that the principal, I don't want to get into the poor man's, all of the stuff he's been up to, but he's made a few enemies, sort of, in the press. I think he's having a little battle with WCAX, and he brilliantly put your name in an article in the paper.
He called her in for a behind closed doors, which I think was a completely inappropriate thing for him to do, meeting that lasted about 15 minutes,
Right.
where he acknowledged that he had done this to my daughter, that he had put her name
Yeah.
inappropriately in the paper. He had named her and ascribed certain statements to her, not all of which were true.
Nice.
I wouldn't say any of them were true.
Oh, that's great.
That's right. So he felt so repentant about this, and I think he knows that something is going to come of it, and it will.
May not want to share the whole.
That he would call her and apologize
Oh.
for his actions. Well, this is pending.
Yeah.
The saddest thing to me was the first couple paragraphs. He keeps the anonymity of several students.
Right. Right.
He says, "These students, this student."
Yep. And
Three
then
paragraphs later, you see my name
bam.
with a direct quote from him.
Wow.
And I asked him, "Did you say my name to the reporter?" And he told me yes.
Wow.
I think your name appeared how many times? A couple of 3
At
times?
least 3.
Yeah.
I sincerely hope that school board pays attention. That's just not appropriate. I'm sorry, but it's not.
He's also gone after WCAX,
Oh.
accusing them of fake news.
Oh, good for him.
Oh,
good
what a
luck
move.
with that.
What a great move.
Exactly.
And WCAX has pushed back vigorously.
Yeah. I must say that's one thing I would never say about WCAX of all the years I've lived here, knowing the reporters and just how they operate. So
Now they
fake
think
news
that
isn't one of their things.
they think that WCAX, who covered the meeting on January
Right.
31st, Thursday night, he alleges that WCAX was creating a story for circulation where no story existed,
Oh, well.
and that he had never said what the reporter attributed to him as having said, and he thought it might make good material for a class in how not to report news.
Great.
And WCAX management took exception to this.
Right. Excellent. Well, I really commend you both. Will anything else we should chat about all of this, except stay tuned for the flag?
Well, I would tell people that if they wish to, because we need to keep the pressure on, even though we have a resolution
Right.
right now, we need to make people understand, or at least this principal and some other school administrators understand that this is a cherished and voluntary activity that Americans like to have their children engage in.
Right.
And that in the case of Hazen High School, if you wish to call and leave a polite message.
Right.
The phone number is area code 802-472-6511, extension 0, or any other number that you want to go to.
You'll get somebody.
You'll get
That's
some.
right.
And let them know that the pledge is legal, it's traditional, and it's convenient, and you want to see it continue. And if there are people out there in the viewing audience who want some advice on how to effect this change in their own community, to either
Yeah.
bring the pledge back or keep it if it's being challenged, I would invite people to communicate with me by
Oh, good.
email.
Excellent.
And my email is Ted Tedesco, and I'll spell that for you. It's all one word, TEDTEDESCO @AOL.com.
Easy enough. And I think the most important thing is the kids want it. And it's their class.
Yes, ma'am.
Jennifer, do you have anything else that you might want to say to folks?
Keep
or to
our-
your fellow students?
Yeah. Keep our pledge. It's important. Administration is not as scary as you think.
There you go.
You're stronger by the numbers. Keep doing what you're doing.
That's true. Jennifer, I understand that you are a fantastic painter.
Yes.
Your dad sent me a picture, and he said you just sort of whipped it out of Iwo Jima, which was spectacular.
Thank
I
you.
would love to share those with our viewers. If you would send me some pictures of the
Absolutely.
pictures, although I would love the pictures, but and I'd like to show them at the end of the show.
Yeah. That'd be
Okay.
wonderful.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week, and in the meantime, keep listening beyond the sound bites.